So for those who clicked on this video, honestly, God bless you. I mean, I don't expect many to click on this video, but this is a video that if you are a really OG viewer, you know how long it's been since I came up with this idea. Now, I will be talking about it in the realm of Demon Slayer, so he will not be going to Shield Hero. But this is what if Tanjiro was the Sword Hero. Now, for those who don't know who the Sword Hero initially was, this is ripped straight from the Rising of the Shield Hero. Yes, those who know the Rising of the Shield Hero, you know that Season 2 and Season 3 were absolute piles of garbage, so that's why I stopped doing content on them. And for those who question why I don't, I mean, I hope you're watching this video because at least there's some relation to Shield Hero in general. Now, with all that said, I want to talk about what the Sword Hero really entails. Now, this won't be the most realistic thing, and I kind of thrive on the fact that a lot of my what-ifs won't be realistic. I will, of course, have a couple in there that are strictly to the world and very concrete about certain things that I want to talk about, but this is a little bit more general, and this is a little bit more of my style that I used to do and still love to do because I find it very enjoyable. Now, with that said, I want to talk about what the Sword Hero can do. Now, for starters, Tanjiro would still have his family entirely die, and that's something for a little bit later. But there would be a passed down sword throughout generations for Tanjiro. Yes, this is a little bit different than what normal Shield Hero is, being summoned into a world and given this blade and it's attached to you, but Tanjiro would still be attached to this blade, just in a different and traditional sense. Tanjiro would grow up with this so-called blade, would learn certain skills with this so-called blade, but would not know much about it until far later. And he wouldn't know anything until his family would all pass on to the next life. As sad as that may be, this is still the reality of Tanjiro, and nothing would stop that, especially when he lacks information. So his family would pass on, and his sister Nezuko would be turned into a demon, and all he would have left is the sword that was left to him by his family, and more importantly, his father. Now, this sword is far different than any sword you could possibly imagine, and this sword is something that would kind of break the minds of anybody else that would even wield it, and kind of confuses Tanjiro drastically as well. Because when he fends off Nezuko, and eventually someone else would arrive by the name of Giyu Tomioka, and he would convince Giyu that Nezuko is okay and that he's his sister, well, and they go through all of this, you know, the same things that normally would occur. Going to Urokodaki, fending off against a demon that is over there, and so on. But during this time, he still would have this sword. Urokodaki would question it, but I mean, what is he supposed to tell him? He says that it's a family heirloom and it was passed down. But Urokodaki says that that is no normal sword. Like, it doesn't look like it even has a sharp edge, but when you touch it, it feels like it's sharper than anything you could possibly imagine. But it's odd. How would it even work against a demon? And Tanjiro actually wasn't able to really use it against the demon he went head to head with because of how much faster the demon was compared to Tanjiro. But that doesn't really matter at this moment. What really matters is when Tanjiro learns exactly what the sword does. Now, this is completely insane because he would actually be exploring the area around Urokodaki's place and find a couple materials, and these materials would be anything from plants, bushes, maybe even berries, and he would actually kind of walk around picking them up, but as he does, he would trip over and he would land his hand with the berries on his sword. But as he does this, it seems like the sword would absorb these so-called berries, as if it was absorbing them and actually understanding what those things did. Now, with that said, Tanjiro would be shocked by this as he would grip the sword tighter and look around. And as he does, he could see something out of the corner of his eye. It seems like there's a weird button he can somehow press, but he doesn't understand. Like, this must be some visual thing. Like, it's messing with his mind. Like, he doesn't know what's going on. Maybe he stepped on some sort of hallucinogenic poison or a plant, but that's not true. Tanjiro would actually somehow activate this little button, and it would show an entire stat system. Show the armor that he's not wearing, obviously, he's not wearing any armor. but show all of these abilities that he could possibly use, and a giant skill tree that he can do by just absorbing different items from the ground, from around the area, and so on. Now, I'm not going to act like Tanjiro will understand and know how to do everything here and from here on out, because he doesn't. There is no video games in this world. I mean, this is a world that is far, far, far before even video games would exist, and he wouldn't know much about what's happening. He would even relay this to Urokodaki, but Urokodaki would have no information on it either. But he would tell him that if the sword is powerful, if it's mythical, and somehow what he's saying is true, that he should utilize it in their training. And that's exactly what Tanjiro would do, and this would be the best decision of his absolute life. Because when he starts actually utilizing the sword, learning water breathing techniques, the water that is actually being used, or is supposed to be just a normal technique, he's actually able to utilize it in its entirety. He's able to utilize the water not only in the forms, but also make different blades that would look like crystallized water, or kind of like ice, extremely sharp ice in itself. Now, there's multiple things that he could do with these swords. This sword has insane amounts of offensive abilities, but at the same time, well, he's not going to know how to use them until far later. But there's one thing that he'll eventually learn and actually utilize, and that's the fact that the sword can absorb other metals, and he hasn't been able to utilize this at all just yet. But once he's able to prove that he's strong enough to head on to the final selection, which, let's be honest, he'd be far, far stronger because of the sword on its own, but also the breathing style that he now knows in water breathing. He would go and take on the final selection, and this wouldn't even be fair, not even close, because the abilities that he's able to use with the sword, without the sword, water breathing, and all of it would make him so much more powerful. The water breathing techniques would allow him to do more or less fighting abilities, or kind of these overall offensive abilities that would allow him to strike through range, sending waves of actual water, or crystallized water, being that of ice, freezing in the air, slicing through the heads of demons. Now, we know this doesn't necessarily kill a demon, especially because there's probably restrictions there, but that's where we'll get to after he's able to defeat all the demons in the final selection. Because after he beats all those demons in the final selection, he would get his Nichiren medal, and normally you would send it off or the ore to more or less be made into a sword. But instead of that, Tanjiro would absorb the ore into his blade, and he could actually make his blade fully made out of Nichiren. And that would allow all of his abilities to be lethal to all demons, or at least chopping the head off of all demons. And this would be something insane as well, because a new path would unlock, actually showing every single breathing style that ever existed, including that of sun breathing. And this would allow him to unlock sun breathing even earlier, because now that he has that extension into the pathway and the information that he gains from the sword itself, he now knows that he could actually utilize sun breathing. And, well, let's just say this: when he's able to utilize the power of the sun and actually be able to utilize it from a ranged distance that can actually kill demons, well, he is an absolute powerhouse to deal with. I mean, no demon at this point would be able to take him on, or at least no demon that he actually can take on in the normal canon earlier on would be even able to stand a chance. Now, let's be honest, the physical abilities of Tanjiro wouldn't be anything insane, at least not at this moment. But when he would take Nezuko and take on the Swamp Demon, that fight just would not compare to anything Tanjiro is actually capable of. That fight would be so easy for Tanjiro, because he would be able to slice through the air, more or less, slicing all of the heads off of the demons, or even though it's only one demon, but all the clones plus the original clone, and instantly kill all of them, and vaporize them, gone, in an instant. And that's how easy it would be for Tanjiro to finish off that demon specifically, but many of the lower tier demons as well. And he would continue to grow in strength, because he would actually take pieces of the demon that were left over, or that were just about to more or less vaporize, and feed it into the sword. In doing so, it actually gives the sword even more abilities. And these abilities continue to rack up and continue to get even more insane. Actually, he would even take a snippet of the hair of Nezuko's hair, putting it into his sword, thinking that maybe that would be a part of her, so maybe he would get the powers of whatever kind of power that her demon would have, or as a person or as a demon would actually have maybe later on. In which he would get some abilities, but a lot of them would kind of be grayed out, and he wouldn't understand why, but that's because Nezuko just hasn't awakened to anything quite yet. And of course she will eventually, but that's just not at this point. But another thing that I haven't even brought up, and frankly, I don't even think he necessarily needs it, and that would be actually Nezuko technically being a part of his party. We can get even more into it and say that he would get a bonus for having a loyal demon in his party, but he wouldn't be able to like increase her power or anything like that, just because, I mean, we know that there's no dragon hourglass, or there's no weird kind of mythical thing that he can kind of use to change it. But with Nezuko now in his party, which would technically happen if she was part of his party, she would be even stronger than before. A regular Nezuko, no transformation, no extra powers that she somehow discovers. She's already levels above the normal version that she would even be at this point. And everything kind of goes in the direction for Tanjiro. Now, he would meet Muzan for the first time. Muzan would actually recognize the sword, or not necessarily recognize it like in terms of knowing what it is, but recognize it in terms of it being something drastically different. Drastically different is kind of an understatement when you think about it, but the demons that he takes on in the near future, the ones that he gets, or Muzan basically sends after him, are absolutely nothing. Literally nothing at this point. And frankly enough, all of it until Rui kind of goes exactly the same. And I hate to do that and be like, oh, let's skip through a ton of this, but that's kind of the reality of it. Everything up until Rui is exactly the same. Yes, he probably would absorb some of the demon's powers, and he would get some interesting ones. Is that definitely would be kind of the idea, right? Like, try to absorb the powers and the strengths of these demons and try to utilize them for yourself. Now, he would already have one that's actually and arguably very, very strong, and that's with the Swamp Demon. The Swamp Demon was able to more or less make portals and also make clones of himself, at least to a certain extent. So the only fight that would really open his eyes to something that would be kind of remotely challenging would be against Rui. But keep in mind, he now has Zenitsu and Inosuke, and you could even make the argument that he could add them quote unquote to his party, giving them a drastic strength boost in general. And as they continue to slay and kill demons, they continue to get upgrades and continue to have their stats leveled up even more. Now, we know that Zenitsu basically won't fight unless he's practically completely and utterly passed out, but Inosuke will fight no matter what. So this leveling system actually would benefit Inosuke drastically, because there's multiple demons that they would fight even before they would fight Rui. So there's a lot of time that Inosuke would actually be able to level up himself, and he probably would have a lot easier time taking on the father demon in the forest, and just the fact that he'd probably be able to actually help take on Rui. But I mean, I think all of you will understand that Tanjiro doesn't need help taking on Rui, and especially if he has Nezuko helping him already, who's getting XP for every single demon they faced from here on out. And on top of that, Tanjiro has literally been able to actually utilize sun breathing to a large extent already because of how early on he's gotten it. And his understanding has been read all throughout his sword, because let's be honest, this sword is sentient. I mean, it is an absolute crazy technology, not only for just the world at this time, but for the world in general. It's a sentient blade, a blade that has mass amounts of information, and honestly, the information could be freaking limitless. And at the end of the day, the sword would make it so Tanjiro has a very easy time taking on a lot of these demons, like I've said before. And Rui would not be that much different. Like, he would bring another idea to the table for Tanjiro with how strong these demons can truly get, but Tanjiro's also able to absorb kind of some of the strings that are used by Rui in his blood demon arts, and in doing so, he's able to understand and actually figure out exactly what to do to counter it. And once he's able to do that, I mean, Tanjiro can surprise Rui with a long-ranged attack, an attack that can actually kill him without being a contact-to-contact slice of a blade by a Nichiren blade. And I mean, if I'm you, or if I'm a demon, and I see a guy charging forward with actual fire that looks like straight up the sun, I would be terrified. I'd be running for the fences and praying that Muzan forgives me, because that is not a fight I want to take. And after defeating Rui, this is where things get drastically different. And you might be wondering, like, how would he get drastically different? Doesn't he just dog walk the entire verse? And yeah, I'm with you. He would 100% be able to dog walk the entire verse. That's if Muzan decides to be stupid and actually take on this version of Tanjiro. At the end of the day, Muzan is connected via all his demons. So do you think that a Muzan, or this Muzan, would be like, hey, it's a good idea to try and kill this guy that could literally do all of our demon blood arts and even more, and seemingly has a special sword that is sentient and that literally cannot leave his side? I don't know if Muzan would find that to be the best idea to deal with, especially after the fight with Akaza, but we'll talk about Akaza in a second. Now, I want to talk about when they go to the Hashira headquarters, because this is where things actually would change. Now, Tanjiro is stronger than most of these people here, and they can't cuff him, they can't put him away. Like, there is no way of getting rid of his sword. He'd be able to break free of the chains very easily. His raw strength would be insane, so it would be more of a conversation. They would be talking about Nezuko, talking about what's going on, and more or less what they should do. But Giyu and many others would sign that paper and say that, hey, like, we'll more or less die if Nezuko eats a human, which completely is going to happen still. But all Tanjiro really has to tell them is that his sword is practically the reason why they're going to defeat Muzan, and that he's also met the King of the Demons, and that he does not fear him. And everybody would stop in their tracks, wondering how strong is this guy truly. But once Giyu and Shinobu vouch for the fact that, well, he could literally use blood demon arts, or at least to an extent, and actually shoot water and also what seems to be fire from the sun at different demons, they would all understand the climate of what they're talking about. And he would tell all of them that he uses this sword, and he doesn't understand it fully, but he knows that it helps others around him. It has leveled up Zenitsu, Inosuke, Nezuko, even himself, to the point that they're drastically stronger in physical attributes, mental attributes, and much more. If you look at their capabilities and what they're able to do, it's drastically better than anything they possibly have seen. And he explains that it's all because they're part of his party, quote unquote. Everyone's confused. What the hell does that even mean? Like, what are you talking about, party? And he would more or less say that it's something kind of like a weird game. He doesn't call it a video game because he obviously doesn't know, but he says that it's like some visual representation of how strong someone is. And he doesn't understand it, but his sword can absorb different metals, take on forms of different weaponry, and so on and so forth. And it seems that he actually gets stronger if he wears armor, gets better weapons, or kind of absorbs different things, and everyone's kind of shocked by this. Like, this makes no sense at all, and they would kind of think that he's lying, but he would void his entire party, telling Zenitsu and Inosuke that, and also Nezuko, that they would have to figure it out later, but he doesn't know if he could actually add a ton of people to his own party. So he would add a couple of the Hashira, adding Giyu, adding Shinobu, and also adding Sanemi, the Wind Hashira. And once they realize that there's a connection with all three of them, seeing that their visual representation is actually different, seeing that even in their own heads, they kind of see a weird tint, as if they're part of something that is completely sentient. And he would tell them that they're gonna train together and fight a couple demons throughout this time, and he'll show them how much stronger they currently get. This is no normal training. This is nothing that they've ever seen before. And after a couple of days, they would be believers. And very quick, they would be. Because this would be absolutely insane. How the hell does someone get a sword like this? A sword that seems to be sentient. A sword that seems to have blown this world into different proportions. But let's be honest, this was their chance. And Ubuyashiki knew it. This was truly their chance to take Muzan by storm. And after a ton of training, and after Tanjiro helps out so many different people, and as he would gain more and more knowledge on sun breathing, and also all the other breathing styles he could possibly think of, which is also a thing, and all the pathways to most breathing styles being that of thunder, beast, wind, anything you can think of that is currently accessible to him. So of course moon breathing is not accessible to him, but all of them that are, he's actually able to quote unquote use. Now you may be wondering, I mean, of why would he use it if he could use sun breathing and stuff like that? And I agree. I mean, sun breathing is the accumulation of everything, and everything has been made from sun breathing. But this is a little different because he's been given actual powers. We're talking actual powers from these different techniques, or these different types of breathing styles. Something like wind breathing would actually cause a gust of wind. And probably not just a gust of wind, probably we're talking about climate of a tornado. So these things would definitely and drastically help. In a way, this is kind of like, what if the animation wasn't actually just animation? What if the elemental powers were actually real, but it was just for Tanjiro? Because that's what the sword hero would truly make of this, and that's the type of powers he would straight up get from it. Giving Tanjiro kind of this bare bones leveling system in a way would make it kind of insane for him, especially when he's able to get and grasp on to different types of techniques. I want to make this clear. This is not your traditional leveling system. If anybody who has seen Shield Hero, it's just not your traditional leveling system. It's just a little bit different. The absorption aspect through the weaponry, the weaponry changing based on what you want and stuff like that, it's just not the same as your traditional kind of like MMO RPG, or kind of like your Baldur's Gate type of game. Now, with that said, we're already like 20 something minutes into this video, and I'm gonna be honest, all of these next fights he's going to completely wash. And I just wanted to bring this to the table just because the sword hero is a little bit different, and I wanted to bring the idea of what he would be able and be capable of if he was given a sword like this. The same sword that Ren got in Shield Hero, or Rising of the Shield Hero. I mean, there is a ton of utility, ton of offensive abilities that he could truly utilize. It's absolutely insane. It is insane how crazy he could be, and we're not even talking about a possible Curse series or Bless series, which, if you don't know what those are, I won't expand too much on them, because if you actually do enjoy Shield Hero, which more power to you, but if you actually enjoy it still so far, then you'll probably eventually hear about those, or at least hear about Bless series in the near future. Now, I don't want to go into these other fights, because Akaza, the Entertainment District, all of those would be absolute and utter washes. Tanjiro would become a brand new Hashira because he has obviously earned that. And Muzan, if he was, in my book, actually smart, would not take on this Tanjiro. He would wait and pray that he would die, and that this sword would not get passed down, because this sword would transcend anything Muzan could possibly do, and he would have to wait dormant until, well, he actually gets a chance to obtain his immortality. Now, with all that said, I would love to hear what you guys have to say and what you would have loved to hear me talk about in this video. And because frankly, sometimes it's like that. Sometimes I won't be able to cover every last little bit that some of you had in mind. Maybe some of you are like, oh, well, what about this? And you leave it in the comment section, and I'm like, wow, I didn't even think about that. That's a great thing to think about. And I love hearing your guys' feedback in the comment section. This is obviously a far different video than you're used to seeing, because this was more of like a fantasy type of world, and more of like a what would actually occur and what type of abilities he would gain from actually utilizing the sword from the Rising of the Shield Hero, other known as the Sword Hero. Yeah, like I said, if you enjoyed the video, show some love, leave a like, leave a sub, leave a comment down below, all that good stuff. And I hope all y'all have an amazing day. Later.